Daf Kuf Beis Amud Beis, right at the top, new parak Haboina. Haboina Kama Yivne V'Echayev. Boina building, that's one of the Avos Malachas. Haboina, if one builds, Kama Yivne V'Echayev, what is the minimum share of binyan? Every malach has a minimum share. What is the minimum share of boina building in order to say that the person is chayiv, that he's done the malacha? Haboina kolshu, any minimal amount. A minimum amount of building is considered a malacha. We'll see in the Gemara what that accomplishes, so that we should say is considered a malacha. If someone chisels a stone, so if he, as Rashi says, if he, for example, squares off the stone, he makes it smooth, he etches ornamental designs in the stones according to the custom, the local custom. If he does any of these, he's chayiv. We'll see in the Gemara what is the chiyuv for Masatis? Which chiyuv, which malacha are we talking about? But chiseling the stone is a malacha, he's chayiv. V'makish bepatish v'matad, and if a person makes a makih bepatish, the final banging with a hammer, or with a large hammer, with a sledgehammer, if he does any of these, he's chayiv. This is also considered a malacha, and he is chayiv for being makih bepatish. So for instance, if he has a stone and he's cutting out the stone from the mountain, the final banging, the final blow that he makes to now separate it from the mountain, to hew the stone from the mountain, that's the final act. That's called makih bepatish. Makih bepatish is the completion of the malacha. When he's completed and he's done the final act in performing that labor, that's makih bepatish, that's the malacha of makih bepatish. If somebody drills, he drills a hole. He drills a hole in a wall or in a piece of wood. We'll see in the Gemara, we'll discuss it in greater detail. Kolshu. Again, all of these, any minimal amount. If he does a minimal amount of these things, he's chayiv. Then he's chayiv. This is the rule. If a person does a malach and it has permanence, it's enduring. And if he does it on Shabbos, b'Shabbos, if he does it on Shabbos, he's chayiv. Then he's chayiv. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he says, he's chayiv. Even if a person strikes a hammer on the anvil on Shabbos, he is also chayiv because he improves the work. He improves the malacha, so he's chayiv. So Rav Shimon Gamliel is adding over here that not only if he does what we discussed before was he's makih bepatish, but over there he's makih bepatish, like the example that was given, that he does the final banging to separate the stone from the mountain, to hew the stone from the mountain. There he's doing the final act on the item which is the malach is being done to, on the stone. Over here, Rav Shimon is adding on, he is being meisef that if he bangs not on the stone, he bangs on the anvil. He takes the hammer, and aside from making the banging on the final act to separate the stone from the mountain, but if he bangs with the hammer on the anvil, that's also makih bepatish, because he's mesak and he improves the malacha. So the Gemara will discuss what kind of improvement does that make when he's banging with the hammer on the anvil. What does that have to do with the malacha that he's performing? That will be discussed in the malacha. Taisus argues with Rashi's on definition of the makih bepatish. Rashi says he's banging, he makes a final blow to separate the stone from the mountain. Taisus argues on that because in the Mishkan they didn't use stones. Stones were not used to build the Mishkan. So he argues on that pshat in Rashi. Rashi is saying the banging on with the stone, the hewing of the stone, he's not referring to the case of the Mishkan. Rashi is referring to a case of makih bepatish. What would be an example of makih bepatish? But Taisus says the Mishnah should be discussing something that was in the Mishkan. So rather, Taisus says that it's the final act of making the kli, of fabricating the kli, the final act of banging, which now makes the kli. In the Mishkan, they needed kalim, and they had a kalim for the Mishkan, for the Avodah. That final act of fabricating the kli, that's makih bepatish. Frankly, the Gemara kolshu l'may chalzi. It says a baina is baina kolshu, any minimal amount. Well, what is the purpose? What is the function of a minimal amount of binyan that you should say that that's a shiur of a malacha? L'may chalzi. What is it used for? Amar Rav Yirmiyah shekain ani chayfer guma, and ani will dig a small hole lahatzniya ba'prutaysav. When he wants to hide away some small coins, he makes a small hole on the ground. Now, making a hole on the ground of a house, keep in mind in those days they had earthen floors, so making a small hole in the house, so he's making a compartment in his house, and that's baina. He makes a small little hole to hide away his coins, his several coins, so that's a kolshu, a small little hole, a minimal amount of a hole that he can even put in a few coins, then that is baina. And it has a function. The kavasa gabi mishkan, similarly in the mishkan, shekain taifrei yiriyas chayfrim guma latzniya b'machteyem. That the people that were making the mishkan, who were sewing the curtains, so they would also sometimes make a small hole to hide away, to put away their needles. They would need to store away their needles. They would also dig a small hole to store away, to keep their needles over there. So that is what Rabbi Yirmiyah says. He says, no, he argues on that. The needles will get rusty if you put it in the ground. Therefore, he said that the sewers, the people who are sewing, they would not do that. Ella, what is an example of baina kolshu where we would have a similar case in the Mishkan? Shekain ani oisa pitpute kiraketana. A poor person will make a stand for a stove, or a small stove. He wants to hold up a small little stove. He makes a small stand. Lishbay solek derektana, so that he can put a small pot of food on it. They have also got a Mishkan, and a similar case in the Mishkan would be that the ones who dyed the curtains in the Mishkan, if they were missing a small measure of dye, so the way they made the dye is they cooked the samanim, so they cooked the herbs. If he's missing a small quantity of it, then they would do a similar type of thing. They would also make a small stand to put a small pot or kettle and to cook the samanim that they would need for the dye, to make the dye that they were missing. So that's the pshat that he says. But Ravach Bar Yaakov Amar, he says, no, he argues on this as well. He says, Ein aniyas b'malkam ashiras. There's no aniyas, poverty, in the malkam ashiras. Building of the Mishkan was done with ashiras, with grandeur and wealth. They wouldn't make a small little pot, a small little stand. Ella says that's not the case, but shekain balabais yeshlei nekev b'biros v'saisma. If a person has a house, he has a small hole in the wall of his house, so he seals it up. So he now seals it with clay. He seals up the hole. So that is an act of binyan. He had a hole in the wall. Now he seals it up. That's an act of binyan, of building. The kavos gabi mishkan, and a similar case in the Mishkan, shekain keresh and nafaboy darna. If there was a plank that had a hole in it, there was a board that had a hole in it, then matef l'soichei they used to pour into it lead to seal it up. They would seal it up. So similarly, and that was in the Mishkan, a minimal amount of binyan. Person has a hole in the wall and he seals it. That's binyan. A minimal amount. It's just constructive purpose, and that's a malach and he's chayiv. Amr Shmuel Hamitzadeh is heaven chayiv. One who takes a stone and he positions in the ground. He places it on as a foundation, a stone that's a foundation, and he sets it in place and he positions it. Then he's chayev, he's already chayev, and that's considered binyan. People are constructing. One laborer puts down the stone, the other one puts down the tiyid, the cement, and chayev. The one who puts the tiyid is chayev. Placing the stone on itself alone without cement is not building. The one who puts the cement, he's the one that built it. Now you see over here, they're just placing the stone on its own. That's not called binyan. It's cementing it. So how could Shmuel say, Hametzadeh desoheven chayev? Even according to you, the Sefer says Rabbi Yossi Aimer, Afila Hela V'Hiniach Al Gabi Dimos Shel Avonim Chayiv. If one even puts a stone or a block on a wall without cementing it, even without positioning it in place, he's chayiv for just putting it on top of the wall. So you see that you're chayiv even for that. Ella Tlasa Binyanav. You must say that it depends on the position on the wall, the circumstances. There's 3 sections of the wall, and what constitutes binyan for each section is different. There's the foundation, there's the middle section, and there's the top part. The bottom part of it has to be set in place and has to be now placed within earth surrounding it. It has to be placed in place with this earth surrounding it. The middle section of the wall, in order to hold it into place, it needs also to have cement. And the law of Hanocha Ba'alma, and the top part is with the Hanocha Ba'alma, just by placing it on top, even without positioning, setting it in place and setting it into the earth, you're chayiv just for putting it on top. So Shmuel is talking about the foundation, Tanakama is talking about the middle section, and Rav Yossi is talking about the top part of the wall, and there's no machlokes. Masechet is a person who chisels a stone. Masechet mishumay mechayev. Which malacha is Masechet? Which is it of malacha? If someone who chisels a stone, he's chayev for which malacha? So as the Rishonim speak out, it's enough kamina that if a person does it b'mezid, for instance, then he has to have asra. And they have to warn him that this action is chayev, and he'd be chayev for this, he's chayev skila, and that this action is a particular av malacha. Which av malacha is it? So we have to identify the particular av malacha. Or secondly is, we know that you're chayev a total potential of 39 avos malachas. So if a person does an av and a toldom of that av, or an av twice, he's only chayev 1 chatas. If he does 2 different avos, then he's chayev 2 chatos. So which av is Masechet, and therefore to determine, well, if he did Masechet and something else, is he doing the same av twice, or is it 2 different avos? So which av is it? Rav Amar Mishum Baina. Rav says it's building. He is now building, he's making the stone, and making the stone is part of the process of building, so that's considered building. O Shmuel Amar Maki B'Patish. Shmuel says no, it's considered Maki B'Patish. It's not considered building, because he's preparing the stone for building, but in it itself is not building. But by chiseling the stone, he is finalizing, he is preparing the stone, he's making putting the final touches on the stone, so that is Maki B'Patish in the fabrication of the stone. Now, even though when he chisels, one might say that, well, it's only Maki B'Patish when he's Masechet the entire stone. When he chisels the entire stone and completes the smoothing out or the etching of the entire stone, then it's Maki B'Patish. He's completed that stone. But if he only chisels part of the stone, why should that be Maki B'Patish? The stone has not been completed. The Kilos Yaakov says a chiddush that we view a part of the stone as that part of the stone has been completed. So therefore, he explains in Rashi that even though the entire stone perhaps has not been, the finishing touches have not been put onto it, but on that portion of the stone that he did, he was Masechet, the finishing touches have been put on that component, on that portion of it, and that's the Maki B'Patish of that portion of it. So Al Kaponim, that's the machlokes. Rav says it's Baina, and Shmuel says it's Maki B'Patish. He holds that it's Maki B'Patish and it's not Baina. In similar machlokes, the more continues. If a person makes a hole in a chicken coop, he makes a hole in the chicken coop. He therefore makes the hole to let the fumes let the odors out. Rav Amar Mishum Baina. Rav says that's Baina. Just like when you build, you make a window, you make a door. In the chicken coop, you make that hole, it's also Baina. Shmuel Amar Mishum Makeh Bepatish. Shmuel says no, it's not considered Baina. It's considered Makeh Bepatish. It's Makeh Bepatish. Tosfos explains the machlekes that it makes a hole. Shmuel says it's not considered to be Baina because it's not Baina, and normally a hole like a window, etc., is to let air in, to let fumes out, let air in. Or a door, people come in and go out. And this hole over here that he's making in the chicken coop is considered only to let the fumes out, and it's not really, the purpose of it is not really to let fresh air in. So therefore, Tosfos says that Shmuel does not consider it to be boina, because it's not considered to be a Pesach that's l'hachnis l'haitzi. But Rav would hold, on the other hand, that it is, that it has a dual function. So it is considered boina. A similar case, a third case, if a person puts a handle in a hole or a handle in a shovel. Now there's a hollow part and a metal blade, he puts the handle in, and then there's a peg to secure it firmly and fasten it in place so it doesn't slip out. So one who puts the peg in the hole, Rav Amar Mishum Baina, Rav said the chiyuv is Baina, Ushmuel Amar Mishum Makeh Bepatish, and similarly Shmuel says it's Makeh Bepatish. It's not considered Baina, it's considered Makeh Bepatish. Now the Gemara will discuss these three cases, but Tosfos and many of the Rishonim point out, and what seems to be a problem with Rav, the Rav says that when he inserts the peg, now he's got the handles firmly in place to the blade. He's now constructed this hole, or he's constructed this shovel, but we have a principle of ein binyan b'kelim. So how can you say Yechai Mishum Baina ein binyan b'kelim? And this is a keli. It's not a building. Tosfos says that principle of ein binyan b'kelim applies only when it's not a binyan gomer. For instance, if there's a menorah that has components, and he assembles the components of the menorah, even if he fastens it firmly in place. But that's not a binyan gomer. Over here, he said this is the completion of the construction of the utensil. Without the handle, it's not considered a kli. Without the peg to hold the handle in place, it's not the handle is not usable, and the shovel is not usable. So therefore, this is a binyan gomer. It's the complete construction, fabrication of the kli. Tosfos says that even though we say ein binyan b'kelim, but if it's a complete binyan, a binyan gomer, we would say binyan by kelim as well. So the Gemara says we need all of these three cases. The Ashmina and Kamaisa, if it only told me the first case by chiseling the stone, Bahi Kama Rav, I would have said the Rav said over there, Mishum the Derech Binyan B'kach, because that's the way you build. You normally build, and you build with blocks, and you prepare the blocks, and you need stones to be chiseled. But if you make a hole in a chicken coop, then derech binyan b'kach, it's not the normal way of buildings, because a small little hole, that's a building normally doesn't have a small little hole. So then derech binyan b'kach, I would say Shmuel. I might think he'd be moed Shmuel that it's not binyan, it's makeh b'patish. And if you only told me that case, Rav, I would say Rav is right over there. That's where he says it rather. He says it's binyan in that case, because it is still similar to building, even though it's a small little hole, but it's made to have air, to have ventilation. But when he puts the peg into the handle of the hole, then there's no similar case by building. You don't construct a binyan, a building, in this type of manner. It's not something that's normally found by a building. I might think that it's considered makeh b'patish and not boina. Ve'ashmin b'ha. If it only told me the case of the peg and the handle, I would have said b'ha kamar Shmuel. I would say there, that's where Shmuel says it's makeh b'patish and not boina because it's not daim the binyan. Aval mahanach tati, in the first two cases, I might have said I might say is moeder lav tzricha. That's why it has to tell me the machlokes applies in all of these three cases. B'layminei Rav Nosson B'Yish Merav Yainus Meru Yaichanan Mesates Mishuma Mechayev. This chiseling, what's the chiyuv? So Achvile B'Yalda Mishum Makeh b'patish. He demonstrated with his hand makeh b'patish. But the Mishnah seems to list them separately. Amasates v'amakeh b'patish. Doesn't this seem to indicate that Masates is not makeh b'patish? Masates and makeh b'patish. Don't say Masates v'hamakeh. It's not two cases. Masates, which is makeh b'patish. Tashma. Let's bring a right from the following. If one drills, and he drills even a minimal amount, is chayev. We understand that he makes a hole, that therefore he's chayev. So we understand, according to Rav, when he says, just like he says, making a hole in the chicken coop is called bainem. We understand making a small hole. Rav says making a small hole is baina. Here also it's a small hole is baina. Says it is similar to making a hole in a binyan, and therefore drilling a small hole is chayv. But according to Shmuel, Lav Gmar Malachu, Shmuel said making the small hole, he said by the chicken coop a small hole is not considered baina. It's makeh b'patish. But over here, making a small hole, a kodeach, drilling a small hole, well, if it's not baina, how could it be makeh b'patish either? It's Bishlami making a small hole in the chicken coop, then we understand it's a small hole, and therefore it's over there we would say that completes the chicken coop. But over here, if you're drilling a small hole in the wall, well, if it's not boina, how is it makeh b'patish? According to Shmuel's Lav Gemar Malachu. So the Gemara says the baze b'mramsa the parzela. When he made the hole, he drilled the hole by piercing it with a long nail. V'shavke begavon, and he left it in the wall. Dahainu Gemar Malacha, meaning you didn't take a drill and make a hole. That in Chanami is not makeh b'patish. It's not the complete act. But we're talking where he took a long nail or a peg and he stuck it into the wall, and he stuck it and drilled it into the wall and left it there to be used as a peg. So that's makeh b'patish because the drilling now completes that act of having now a hook or a peg for him to hang things on, and that is makeh b'patish. So that's why you can have a kodeach that is makeh b'patish.